Hi, Heather Prekop, Senior Director, Global CPG here at Euromonitor, and today here with Howard Telford, our Head of Soft Drinks Research, and Matt Oster, Head of Health Research. And speaking to them just last week, they were out in Anaheim at Natural Products Expo West. And I think many years that you guys have attended this event. We were chatting, Howard, I believe maybe 7, 8, lost count, Matt, 5 plus, is that right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think would just love to get your take on how that went. And maybe we start with seeing as you have all this history attending this event, what was different? Explain maybe the kind of the evolution of what you've seen over the years.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then maybe I'll throw it to Matt. Obviously, this is a really interesting segment of the industry. I know I've heard some people call this the Super Bowl of CPG because it is sort of like the innovation hub, particularly for smaller brands, for some mid-sized brands, even some larger players that launch some brands that are intended for these sort of natural and organic channels. I think one thing that has definitely changed over the years is that this used to be a fairly, wouldn't say niche, but this was these were products that were intended for very specific channels. And so now the growth driver, I think, has moved from, natural consumers in natural channels to conventional channels and mainstream grocery. And of course, Walmart announcing even in the last few months this modern soda shelf where we're expecting to see more functional, more better for you products. So sort of the biggest thing that I think has changed is sort of the mainstreaming of natural and organic. Of
Mhm.
course, a more expansive definition probably of what natural even means in the context of beverages and foods. But it is a lot more mainstream and it's a lot bigger now than I think it used to be in the past.
Great. Matt?
Yeah, I mean, just following up from what Howard's saying is that, in the years that I've been going to Expo West, this orientation around mainstreaming from a food and beverage side is having an effect on supplements, right? So the floor is inundated with new products, but you can sense over the last 5 or so years a shift um, in focus from an innovation perspective towards that food and especially that beverage aisle. So when you're thinking about it from a pure health perspective, that's where you're kind of ceding a little bit of ground. And it doesn't mean that there's not innovation. It just means that if you're seeing final purchasers like Walmart really aggressively engaging with that food and beverage consumer, trying to attract consumers who are thinking about food as medicine or functional food and beverages, it means that supplements have to do kind of even more to stand out on shelf, which we do know is a particular problem at point of sale with consumers. It's a very hard to understand aisle, and so innovation in that space naturally crowds out, and it's just easier for consumers to jump to food or to beverage. And you're seeing that when you walk the show floor. There are a lot of new products, but they kind of can get a little bit drowned out to the big, kind of big booths with like really high profile new products from the beverages space, especially. And you see that again this year, just like in the last few.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
definitely.
one other point. Sorry, Heather. One other point I'd add there, because this just occurred to me. I think, another thing potentially that has changed is now like how important you were at Cagney, obviously, Heather, a couple of weeks
Mhm.
ago, and we have a volume problem in food and beverage, and where is the new volume going to come from? And so, these sort of functional occasions, better for you occasions, better for you products, um, conversion to consumers in these spaces, spending more in these spaces. These consumers tend to be a little more affluent as well.
Hmm.
This is even more important to, you know, where are these where the future volume and the future occasions going to come from? And I think that's why, Expo West, the natural products industry in general, is exciting because this is kind of one of the pockets of future volume in the US.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you, it's a premium play to be able to have that functional component. I think we've heard health halo, health veneer, a way to be able to add those health attributes for that premium price as a way to continue to grow price in an environment that is, consumers are stressed already. And so I think with that, I mean, premium as a one play, health as a one play, but we had been talking, there were other ways that you saw maybe reinvention of some of these spaces within the food or drinks. And so health being one of them, but talk maybe a little bit more about, I think I heard new ingredients, new flavors, new formats, and other occasions.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about this in the video that Matt and I did last week. But one thing that I think is changing a little in terms of how the soda category, bubbles, sparkling, whatever you want to call it, is changing is, I think we've written a lot about the success of some of these prebiotic sodas and Olipop and Poppy, which have been standout high performance brands in the US in what is not a particularly dynamic category in terms of volume growth. But one of the ways my thinking personally is changing about this is, prebiotics. We know gut health is an important driver for some consumers. But what I'm seeing now and what we were seeing on the show floor, a lot of brands that are leaning more on sort of bolder, more creative, more exotic flavors, more regional flavors within soda, cleaner ingredients, things like aqua frescas, sort of fruits that you don't typically find, or even, herbal ingredients or peppers, jalapeno peppers and lime, for instance, but also have that lower sugar content. And so it's less potentially about the sort of functional ingredients you can pack into that product, and more about, can you have a better for you sparkling option, whether that's a sparkling water, whether that's a soda that has, less sugar than a traditional CSD, but maybe, not necessarily no sugar at all. That might be the actual driver, the real driver of some of the volume that we're seeing in this space, because we're seeing a lot of brands now. Fresh Fizz Soda was one that comes to mind. They did a great job. Fruga, Spade is another one that was on the show floor. Delacaye was one that isn't new, but I think there's some interesting stuff with sort of Tepache. These are sparkling options. They don't contain as much sugar. In some cases they have a bit of a functional proposition, but I think the real driver there is just they're doing something new and they're doing it, with the ingredients you don't want to see the consumer is interested in cutting back on, which is, of course, predominantly sugar.
Yeah. And that jives again, I'm speaking back to what we saw at Cagney, was this in terms of flavors, ingredients, the ethnic, the spice, the heat is definitely something that was front and center there across the food industry as well.
Yeah, definitely. I would add to that as well in terms of the other ways that maybe some of these categories are being reinvented. So you have soda on the one hand, where I think everyone's kind of responding to modern soda as a category that Walmart's interested in, Olipop, etc. But then you have another category like juice, where if we have a volume problem in drinks overall, we have a massive volume problem in juice, particularly 100% juices and nectars, where, supply, we don't know where that's going to come from. We don't know what that's going to cost over the long term because of climate issues. And so what we've seen with some, both small and big juice brands at the show, is, in that case, they are leaning a lot more into functionality, making direct claims about things like immune support and gut health, even things like energy and relaxation, potentially using juice, not using necessarily 100% juice, maybe cutting back on the amount of juice that's in the product, or reformulating with other juices that don't face necessarily the supply problems we've seen in citrus. But being very direct about this is the health problem that this juice is going to solve. And again, you mentioned health halo. Juice still has that health halo, but I think the price and the sugar is a really big problem, and so that's why we're seeing maybe a bit more functionality in that category.
Right.
Yeah, and just juice as juicing as a vessel for delivering vitamins and nutrients, I think, is something that consumers can relate to.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, I think that Howard's completely right. And I think as long as consumers are comfortable with these products, and they have been for years, and now there's more of a perspective that these products are meeting daily needs from a health perspective, and even from a functional health perspective, right? Certain need states that maybe consumers are now looking more centrally from beverages instead of from supplements. Again, this is all moving from one to the other, and that's creating a lot of pressures on the typical supplements categories, where you're actually having the harder core consumers, but these lighter touch consumers are now moving, I think, more definitively towards food and bev for those options.
Yeah,
And
and
maybe,
I think another potential driver of that is just if we think big picture about the sort of cultural and political context in the US at the moment, and most of the brands in the show are seeking buyers in the US, we have an environment where I think my sense is that, it's things like ultra processing and fear of certain ingredients and the origin of certain ingredients and suspicion of, big food companies, big beverage companies, big agriculture that is driving a movement to, to that maybe it's the processing and the way where these ingredients come from and how they're being manipulated that is something we want to avoid. And so maybe that is also something that weighs a little more heavily on the supplement space and might, provide a boon to two categories like fruit juice, where you have a natural kind of health halo. And if you can get, the micronutrients that you're seeking from, from a natural source, quote unquote natural, because of course that has a very ambiguous definition. Maybe the consumer is looking for that rather than, a processing technique or an ingredient they don't understand.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think I agree. So my one final point on that, Heather, I agree almost completely with what Howard said. The only complicating factor potentially is this upcoming FDA. And I think that there is an expectation that there's going to be a lighter touch on supplements as well. So I don't know that from a regulatory or political perspective, it's all flowing in the same direction. I think there might be some compromising factors there, but I think the overall orientation that you just mentioned, I think is undoubtedly true from what we're seeing at Expo West.
Yeah, and ultra processed is a concern that we're seeing across the board. Sorry, just to circle back, I did want, Matt, you had talked about, emerging need states, and I think maybe worth calling out hydration, especially with GLP-1. This has become, it was a growth segment, and now maybe even more so a growth segment off the back end of GLP-1. You guys had done, some content, co-authored content before on the blurring of lines across health and drinks in this space. Maybe speak a little bit to what you saw from a hydration need state from Expo West last week?
Do you want to start, Howard? Yeah.
Yeah, I could start on that. I think, you know, one of the things that I think is, we talked a little bit about this in a report that we did last year, but I think this is accelerating, is just the sort of fashion, aesthetic, lifestyle component of hydration as a separate driver to the sort of sports positioning that we've seen. That's the origin, obviously, sports drinks, brands like Gatorade, Powerade, Body Armor, that's sort of the origin of what we would call the hydration category. What we're seeing now, there's a brand called Leisure Hydration that was at the show. They've been one of the standouts in the US over the last year. There are other sort of brands moving into this space. Another one is called Local Weather that have sort of a resealable can, which is a unique packaging type within kind of the sports drinks category. But it isn't all about sports, and I think when we saw with the Stanley Cup, the Stanley mugs trend, hydration it's a wellness platform, but it's also something that it's a part of lifestyle, and it's fashionable to some extent as well. And so we're seeing some brands that are sort of capitalizing on this, maybe not really making sport and fitness as big a part of that play, making it more about, we know consumers, particularly younger consumers, see this as just integral to their health, and that every other health goal that they want to achieve, is sort of secondary to everyday hydration. And so that, yeah, it's, for me, I think the thing that stands out is that kind of lifestyle, fashion, trendy component to some of these hydration brands.
So back
Yeah.
to your point of becoming more mainstream is the theme in general of the show. Okay.
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, I think just a quick point out from a hydration perspective, if you're thinking about it from supplements or sports nutrition, I think the only play here is, now that it's become a lifestyle, these are become lifestyle orientations, is that lane is a commoditizable lane, right? It's that everyone's going to be in it, and in a few years they're all going to be completely a shade of white, right?
Mhm.
So if you're a supplement brand or you're a sports nutrition brand, you kind of lead into additional functionalities, right? So which are what they're already doing, which is exactly what Howard said. You know, a lot of these companies don't want to do, but you reaffirm the commitment to hydration as part of a greater set of benefits around performance, around sports, for instance, or around greater supplementation across hydration. And we're definitely seeing that in supplements aisle. I think right now we're in the moment of it being a big lifestyle trend, but that only lasts so long, and it will winnow back down to those consumers who are looking for more than just hydration.
Great. I know, I think just maybe to wrap up, one last question, a fun question, just being, what was your favorite product that you saw last week?
So there's a few. I mentioned a couple of the better for you sodas that I think stood out for me. I think the one category I haven't talked about, which has a much bigger presence now at the show than in the past, is the non-alcoholic alcohol replacement. So either non-alcoholic beer or non-alcoholic RTDs. So there are several brands that are doing very interesting things like non-alcoholic Negronis. I tasted a couple of really good products in that space. There was a product from Texas, I believe, called Jazz that does sort of Latin-inspired flavors and kind of has like a functional proposition. So a mojito with yerba mate. I thought that was a really nice product. And then there was another brand called Monity, which is a South African brand that's seeking distribution in the US that's based on rooibos, so not herbal tea essentially. And those I think they were doing some, some very interesting things. They had an energy proposition. They also had more of kind of an evening, kind of in that non-alcohol space as well. So yeah, those are a few that stand out for me.
Yeah, from my perspective, I was looking for how companies are trying to navigate this space where potentially there's maybe a greater friction with consumers engaging with supplements face on, right? Because of all of these other options in food and beverage. So I was looking for products that either fit a kind of a moment to be lifestyle adjacent, let's say, so maybe new or maybe underutilized formats as an example. So one that I saw, which was quite interesting on this front, was Brightful, which was little canisters of like chewable tablets. So the footprint is, from a packaging perspective, is quite small. It's like you can put it in your pocket, almost like a mint, and can meet your kind of on the go kind of components as opposed to a pill, for instance, or even a gummy. And then one of the other aspects that I know is prominent in the beverage space, but I think that supplements are really trying to claw back based on, I think you mentioned before, GLP-1s, Heather, but also I think just a greater awareness of gut health, right? So gut health being a prominent kind of anchor within the supplement space. So Enzymedica had launched like a colostrum and probiotic mix. And colostrum was quite popular at this show as well. And again, this is kind of the next evolution of gut health, which kind of pops up every few years, and in the supplement space. And so I think there's another orientation there. Again, GLP-1s helps with that story as well due to the side effects to GLP-1s, and the prominence in social media. So I think those are two good examples of maybe some interesting small bets that some of these companies are making in the face of kind of this pressure from outside.
Great. We'll definitely have to check those out. Love a good Negroni. I won't lie. And then just to recap, I think you guys, both did post some of your live recap videos during the show last week. So do check out their LinkedIn for that. And upcoming in a few days here will be a posting on our blog from Howard to recap in a bit more detail on what he saw from a soft drinks perspective. But Howard, Matt, thanks so much again, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
very much.